So the new selection pack recently just dropped, and a lot of people got a lot of strong opinions about it. But we'll say that for another video. Does it actually change the meta or any of the best decks in any meaningful way though? Why don't we go over that? And as always, I am, as you can see, I'm covering a lot of decks here, but I obviously can't cover every single deck in Master Duel, so if there's one that I didn't go over in this video, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll get back to you with my opinion on it. Obviously, most likely, unfortunately, if I don't have it listed in here, it's probably going to reside somewhere down in Rogue, low Rogue, or if not lower. And also, feel free to come back to this video in a couple weeks if I'm completely wrong about this entire thing. You know, get me those views and I'll let you roast me for as much as you want. So why don't we start with some of the new cards. So Raid Raptor, the cover card for the new pack, and they got a new boss monster in Rising Rebellion Falcon, which, shocker, is yet another Towers for the archetype, except this one also nukes your opponent's field when it's summoned during your opponent's turn, probably through like some sort of rank up match. And this deck has turned into one of those decks where if it resolves its going first combo, you're probably going to win the game. And obviously, I don't think it's really a good idea to board break this deck, because this deck summons multiple towers. So, you know, a lot of board breakers, you know, by the nature of this deck having towers, a lot of board breakers aren't really effective against that. And this deck also has room to run like a bunch of non-engine, like 15 non-engine / hand traps. So while it may not be the best at going second, it can run tech slots and hand trap to help it go second. So it's basically all this support has turned Raid Raptors into a prototypical model modern 1 to 2 card combo deck in 2024. Just the average seek to resolve your combo turn 1, win the game, seek to stop your opponent with hand traps if you go second, so on. And it's honestly it's fine. This deck is definitely competent. This deck is actually honestly pretty decent, and if you don't know how to play against this, if you don't know the choke points, then you're gonna probably get destroyed by it a couple times. So yeah, me included, I'm looking forward to getting my ass absolutely blasted by Rebellion Falcon. Next up, so it's from the thumbnail, but if you're confused about what MBT is supposed to represent, go scroll down in the pack and go check out some of the lower rarity cards. We got a lot more whites in Master Duel now, specifically the white fish monsters, which are, funnily enough, mostly I think being used as goatee support, since a lot of them are like synchro support, like fish synchro. So very funny that now we have whites helping the fish to synchro summon. It's like the jokes write themselves. Yeah, it's at the end of the day though, it's goatee support. Okay, so don't get your hopes too high. But you know, if you are a goatee fan, if you are a fan of the whites, Jesus Christ, don't take that out of context. Yeah, you'll probably be happy about this support. For everyone else, it's not. You don't have to, you know, pay too much attention to this. Yeah, funnily enough, there's also a card called what's it called? White Reincarnation. So yes, I'm gonna stop before I get into any real trouble. The other water archetype in the pack, which is Ice Bears, probably the one that is that you probably. I can't believe I'm saying Ice Bear is the one that's people are more interested in, but I mean it's between this and then the fucking white goatee fish. So yeah, Ice Bear. For those of you who have no idea what the hell Ice Bear does now, it is a water synchro spam deck. This deck makes a bunch of water synchros. So including its the new boss monster Lancia, it can also make stuff like Changing, what's it called, the Ice Jade, Aimer, Gymir, Egerian. I don't know really how to pronounce that. There's more obviously for going second tools, it can make its own ice barrier synchros Trishula into a field. It's the absolute zero Trishula also acts as like a nice removal. That and the thing is the Lancia also summons ice barrier monsters from your deck, and if you don't know what the ice barrier monsters do, I don't blame you, but a lot of them have these pseudo floodgate effects, and Lancia lets you summon a couple of them out like during your opponent's turn, but also like you can obviously you can summon them on your turn as well if you hard draw them. So there's among the floodgates effects, there's one that prevents both players from activating spells until the end of your opponent's turn. There's one that's basically just Dweller for your opponent, and then there's one where that requires every time your opponent wants to resolve a monster effect, they gotta discard a card. So yeah, imagine like playing against a fucking ice barrier, and then they just put all 3 of those floodgate effects on you, plus like 2 to 3 other synchros, and they drew a bunch of cards from Crocodile Dragon, which is also a water synchro monster. Yeah, you'll definitely, if you don't open hand traps against this deck, you're definitely getting smashed. So that's the thing. At least Ice Barrier is respectable now, to where if you don't interrupt them, they will actually win the game, and you actually probably can't really board break them because again they're setting up a bunch of floodgates on you. One of them prevents you from activating spell cards, so it actually just prevents you from using board breakers completely. So yeah, you gotta hand trap this deck too now. That being said, you still have to win going second this deck too, which is a bit harder when all your synchros require 2 if not 3 card investments to make. But you know, I don't know how much room this deck has for hand traps. Last I looked, it wasn't too much, at least not as much as compared to like Raid Raptor, so it's probably a tier lower on its viability going second. But it's you have to respect Ice Barrier now. And here's the deck that everyone's been actually scratch that. Nobody's been hyped about Voiceless Voice. Nobody gives a crap about Voiceless Voice in Master Duel. Why? Because this deck costs like 10,000 URs, and it's not good enough to justify how expensive it is. Okay, so yeah, that's I can just put this right now. This is not going to be among the top decks. Okay, the top decks from last format are still going to be the top decks here, and Voiceless Voice is going to be a bit below them. You could make an argument that whether between Voiceless Voice or Raid Raptor, which one of these is actually the best deck from this new pack. Which the fact that there's a legitimate argument means that, you know, Voiceless is just really not among the top decks. This deck came out way too late. Okay, if this came out at the same time as Snake Eyes, it would have been maybe the second best deck at tops. But Snake Eyes came like when did we get fucking the Snake Eyes support? Months ago? Like how many packs ago? 4 months ago? I don't know. Like this deck is like 4 months overdue at least, or something like that. And it's really not up to like, for example, this deck gets the fact that this came out after Yubel is just adding insult to injury, because Yubel is one of the worst matchups for this deck, since you have a 4K attack ritual monster that your opponent has to attack into, except Yubel doesn't give a shit about that because they will just attack into it twice and then kill you with Nightmare Pain. So yeah, that's another troll move by Konami. Yeah, this deck is okay. It's like it's 1-2 card combo. Doesn't have the most room for hand traps, surprisingly, because it's a ritual deck and you need a lot of engine requirements for ritual decks. But yeah, it's I can tell there's a reason why people aren't too excited about this. So, and a lot of people are saying, you know, if you really don't want to play Voiceless Voice, you can honestly just skip this pack, and you won't be missing that much, to be honest. What's also in this pack is there's like 2 pieces of Chimera support that they just threw in here, Master Duel and Emissary of the House Wax, which it's not the major Chimera support. It's not the Nightmare Apprentice, which is literally the Diabell Star card that's like searches an illusion monster. That's big. We don't have that yet, so Chimera is still a little. It's still a little underpowered in Master Duel. Master Duel is nice. It has some extension. It actually helps you play through some hand traps and makes it so that you don't always just auto lose to your Mirror Sword Knight getting ashed. The House Wax it's okay. It's okay. So what House Wax does is it summons itself during your opponent's battle phase when they declare an attack, and because this is an illusion monster, it can't be destroyed by battle. And then at the end of the battle phase, all your opponent's monsters get no material, so they can't be used for any like material for like Fusion Link or whatever, and their effects are negated. So, maybe that has some application versus Yubel. Maybe. I'm not quite sure how helpful that is. You might not even run it, to be honest. But yeah, these are like cool. I don't think they really. Chimera still has most of its problems that it had before, and also like the Branded engine's really hit, the Runix engine's very hit, and the Horus engine is like okay, but you're missing like you're still missing Nightmare Apprentice, so it's kind of yeah, it's still, this deck still feels underpowered and like a bit fragile, but I mean it is, I guess it's better than it was before, so like that's a plus. And then we have like the Dragon Master Magia decks, or whatever this card is. Personally, I don't think, as of right now, without the new Blue Eye support that was recently announced, I don't think these decks are really that good. I mean, you can definitely build a deck that makes Magia, but I think every deck that actually makes Magia is better off just not playing the necessary engine requirements to actually make the Magia in the first place. For example, maybe the best Magia deck is a Sprite deck, and it honestly feels better off just not running with stuff like Gale Dogger and all that, and like this and the X check and all that stuff, and just doing normal Sprite stuff as opposed to trying to force a Magia out. Like, it's, I mean, it's certainly playable. I'm not gonna say it's like this card isn't good. Like, if you can get it out, like it's fine. It's just I don't think it's right now. There's not really a deck that wants to go out of its way to make this card. But yeah, we'll see in the future. We'll see how long it takes. 2026 or 2025 when the Blue Eyes support comes out. So yeah, now onto some of the best decks of the last round. Yeah, Snake Eyes Fire Kings is tier 1. I don't really know. I mean, I know it. Nothing really has changed since frankly the World Championship qualifiers were this shot onto the scene as the best deck, and there's no decks really has come out that really challenges it. And Pure Fire Kings I'll put down here. You know what? I'll give voices with this. It might be better than Pure Fire Kings. I'll give it that. I thing is, like, people say Pure Fire Kings is more consistent than Snake Eyes Fire Kings. I don't think that's the case. I think what you're doing with Pure Snake Eyes or Pure Fire King is you're taking out starters from Snake Eyes Fire Kings and putting in non-engine. Okay, like you're removing cards like the Snake Eyes engine, like Poplar, Bonfire, Ash, and then you're removing Diabell Stars and Wanteds, which those are starters, by the way. Those are consistency cards. So you're removing starters to be able to fit in more non-engine. That doesn't really, I don't see how that makes the deck more consistent. It's just a different way to play. And like, it's perfectly, it's a fine deck. I just don't think it's not better than Snake Eyes. It's sorry. Yeah, I'm pretty sure people have talked about Snake Eyes Fire King versus Pure Fire Kings plenty of times already since they came out. Yubel is another deck. So Yubel, you could argue, is the second best deck. I don't think it's. Most people that played both Snake Eyes Fire Kings and Yubel agree that Snake Eyes Fire King is better than Yubel right now. Might change if we ever get the Fiendsmith stuff in the future. Hopefully later than sooner, because we are not ready for the Fiendsmith stuff right now. We don't even have the second wave of Snake Eyes support, like the Snake Eyes. I guess we'll get to that later, but yeah, Yubel is Yubel. They keep releasing decks that Yubel absolutely destroys, like Voiceless Voice. So yeah, this deck randomly just has good matchups against a bunch of things. And yeah, sometimes the thing with Yubel is like this deck has like the biggest variance of hand quality I've ever seen, because not only does it run a lot of bricks, but it also there are some starters that are way better than other starters. Opening Nightmare Throne versus opening Dark Beckoning Beast, right? Though technically those are both starters, but like if you open Dark Beckoning Beast, you like lose the one hand trap. But if you open Nightmare Throne, you like play through 2, maybe 3 hand traps. It's like wild how variable this deck is, but it's usually more often than not this deck won't like brick too often, so it's fine. Just kind of gets cooked by Maxi, but you know that's nothing new. And then like Rescues, after playing Rescues, I still think Rescues is really good. It's pretty much, it's like worse than Snake Eyes Fire King, but it has all of the, like most of the benefits of running a fire deck, in that the Snake Eyes engine is broken, Bonfire, the Poplar is broken, Diabellstar is broken. They're really good for playing into boards. So like this is a deck that doesn't rely on simply hand trapping your opponent. You can actually play into boards itself, so you don't have to like fully rely on opening 2 hand traps to completely stop your opponent for playing the game. You can win many games off of like just playing your engine into boards properly. And it still sets up a turn 1 where you're gonna win the game unless they play board breakers, and a lot of the best board breakers against you aren't very popular. Like Evenly Matched, for example. Evenly is just awful against Snake Eyes Fire King, and it's very bad against any of the Unchained setups in Ubel. So like it's not really that effective against 2 of the best decks. So I don't think it's really that popular. And if people aren't playing Evenly Matched and real board breakers, then you're gonna have a hard time playing the Rescue board still. And Pearly is still Pearly. I don't know. This deck it still always performs well. It's just people are playing this less and less. So I guess they're tired from the fucking Xyz Cup. Thank you, Konami, for that, by the way. And yeah, it's Pearly. It's solid. We didn't get the Black Gold Lav, so it didn't have like an additional discard engine. But yeah, Pearly Street is still a good card. And draw 4/6 in the draw phase into a Max C will never not be good in Master Duel. So this deck is probably for the foreseeable future, unless this deck gets hit even more, which I just don't see it getting any more hits, is going to be always a solid top tier contender. Maybe not as good as the others, but won't ever fall far in my opinion. I don't see how they can even hit this deck anymore, to be honest, besides without actually just killing it. And I don't know why you would kill a deck like Pearly at this point. That ship's already sailed. And okay, so Pure Snake, this is like maybe a controversial take. I think Pure Snake Eyes, or Pure Snake Eyes, or whatever you call it, is as good, it's almost as good as Pearly, if not like as good as Pearly. It's just nobody is gonna play Pure Snake Eyes. There's just almost no reason to play it. After it got hit to like, it lost another starter in Bonfire, so now it's at 2 Bonfire. It's like anyone that's playing Snake Eyes variants, they're just gonna play Fire King Snake Eyes, and if not that, then they're probably gonna play, if they want to play Fire deck, so they're probably gonna play Rescues over Pure Snake Eyes. I have not run into Pure. I think I maybe run into 1 Pure Snake Eyes since the last, like in like 2 months, because just no, people are just not playing Pure Snake Eyes anymore. Even though it's solid, it's just worse than the other Fire decks. So why would you play like a worse version? Even though it's still a Fire deck, so it can't be that bad. But yeah, maybe if there's a tier 2.5, I'd put it here. But like honestly, at that point, there's not really that much of a distinction worth putting in there. And Super Heavy Samurai. So it's this kind of got like a slight buff from the ban list. It got 1 wagon back, so it got another starter. We're now back into the territory of having a double-digit amount of starters in Super Heavy Samurai. You know, hell yeah, consistency. I still don't think Pure is really that much of a meta contender, especially since they banned Calamity. And one of the ways this deck tried to push through Max C was to just Calamity lock your opponent, because you know this deck gets cooked by Max C because they can't run as many outs to it, so you're gonna have to have a plan for Max C, and that was one of them. Yeah, maybe we'll see a lot of hybrid builds with Super Heavy Samurai. I fucking saw Super Heavy Samurai Ice Barrier, like Monka Christ, bro. What are you people cooking? But yeah, there's like that Synchron 60 card Synchron Super Heavy Samurai build that I guess got better because it got an extra wagon. So feel prepared to get absolutely steamrolled going second when you don't open 4 hand traps against that. Yeah, I still don't know the best way to play Super Heavy Samurai, but there's something here. Like this deck is still scary as hell. I'm just waiting for like the absolute like a broken build of it to come out eventually. And Branded. So Branded lost the Puppet Lock, and this might sound weird to say, but losing the Puppet Lock and the Edo Lock, I think hurts Brandon as much going second as it does going first. Because like honestly, if you were in a position where you could lock your opponent going first and you could just do your normal combo, normally without the lock, and you would probably be winning anyways. What the lock really helps with is like when you go second, because Branded is a deck that can't play that many non-engine. That's why it focuses more on board breakers. So you're often playing into your opponent's full boards, and it's really hard to kill your opponent when they do their full board and setup. So a lot of times you can wipe their board and you can clear their field, but then every deck searches follow up, so you still have to deal with that on the next turn. And that's where like the public lock comes in, because you would break most of their board, or you could use a board breaker like evenly, which means you are not killing your opponent anyways. And then after that, you set the public lock after you wipe their board, so that even though they search follow up, you could just prevent them from playing on the next turn because of the lock. Without the Edo and public lock now, that's going to be less common. I don't know if people are going to run the DDD thing. That might be the next best card to lock your opponent with, although that's obviously a lot worse, a lot less reliable. And if you're not running the lock, then going second unironically just becomes a bit harder with Branded. I still think Branded is like a good deck. I mean, obviously it's a good deck. They got like 2 spots in the top 10 of the first season of Master Duel, so it is what it is. Like, Branded is what it is at this point. It just got slightly weaker for some builds, but yeah. And next is Sprite. So Sprite in Master Duel, a lot of people in TCG got hyped when the Ice Barrier support came out for Sprite, because you could make Toad with the level 2 Ice Barrier, which I believe is called, what was it called? The Mirror Mage of the Ice Barrier. It's a level 2 Aqua Ice Barrier, so that like enables totally awesome plays. Obviously, you can't do that in Master Duel for the reason that Toad is banned, so that doesn't. The Ice Barrier support just doesn't help Sprite at all. So Sprite is still, at the end of the day, a shifter deck in Master Duel, and I think now it's probably the best shifter deck in the game, especially because you can do stuff. You can run engines like Dark Beckoning Beast and Hero Kid, unironically, and those are level 2 engines that one are not affected by the ban list, like Nimbles, like Nimble Beaver, or like the Frog engine, like Swap Frog, which are both at 1, and 2, those are engines that don't conflict with shifter, so you're free to shifter your opponent with impunity, basically. So yeah, and I'll go over the other shifter decks a bit after, but yeah, I guess because it's the best shifter deck, and shifter is obviously, as you can tell by this meta, shifter still seems like a pretty good card. So yeah, and Life Twin Sprite is the other variant. I used to think Life Twin Sprite was the best one, and then not anymore, because now there's a Sprite build that's about as consistent as Life Twin Sprite, about like it has a similar power level to Life Twin Sprite in terms of disruptions, because now SP is out, so you can always have every Sprite deck just does IP into SP now as their main interruption. But yeah, Life Twin has some issues in that it can't run shifter, obviously, but there's also other hand traps that might be good going come into this format that you also can't run with Life Twin, stuff like Bisc Shields, because if you have a Bisc Shield, then you turn off your Life Twins from special something from the deck, and like that's kind of annoying that you don't have the option to run hand traps that produce bodies like that. So I'm putting this down lower now. It's still, at the end of the day, it's still a deck that runs a ton of hand traps, so it's never going to be like too terrible, but it's just there's a better Sprite variant now, in my opinion. And I guess we'll talk about the other shifter decks too. I think I put them all down here. So the other shifter decks are like Vanquish Soul and Cash Tira. This is gonna, tier 3 is gonna look really weird. Tier 3 is where the majority of the decks are, and honestly, you could argue to put these decks in almost any order, because there's not too much difference. It's honestly like depending on the day what you prefer, whether you prefer like shifter access, or you prefer non-engine, or you prefer I don't know what niche voice this voice gives, anti-targeting, but like new toy, like whatever. The main thing is that all of these are like, the tiers themselves are the big separating points. The order within the tiers are less important, and they can be argued more. But as terms of shifter decks though, there's Vanquish Soul and there's Cash Tira, and Yeah, I guess we can put these down here. Just like Vanquish Soul is not, it's kind of underpowered, to be honest. Like it's kind of relies more on Shifter than a lot of the other Shifter decks, and Gashira kind of not the most consistent deck. It also kind of gets owned by a lot of new cards coming out. Like last pack, there's Typhon, major annoyance for Kashira. But at the end of the day, if a Rise Heart does stick, then you are probably still winning that game. It's just sometimes it's harder to stick a Rise Heart than you would think now, because all of the fire decks have easy outs to a Rise Heart, especially Fire King. Like literally normal summon Ponix out to the Rise Heart. You just search Skyburn and it's done. So it's not at like this deck was never like this deck was always fragile, but now it's sometimes it feels even more so. So it's yeah, a lot of people are just also like running a bunch of Floodgate Turbo and Kashira, but then that makes your going second even worse. Like they're just like forfeiting going second almost. It seems like with all the going first Floodgates and stuff like that. But that is one way to play it. And Flu is like Kashira, but like less consistent. I don't recommend Flu. This deck is if you don't draw the quick play spell plus a starter, like a specific 2-card combo, you lose to literally every hand trap in the game. It feels so so bad. Like if your opponent has any interaction for you, you like die to a not even a stiff breeze, just a breeze. Yeah, I don't see how people like put themselves through playing this deck, man. Like it's so frustrating to know that I have to do this play, but if my opponent like has anything, I lose. It's yeah, the Rabinas, man. It's yeah, and also Exo Sisters. It's kind of in a similar boat with like and the Flu, in that Exorcist also is like low key. It's like a fragile deck. It's super fragile. If you hit the Xyz from searching either like the Caspel or the Michaelis, then they often don't end on any engine interruption. Like Marfa by itself isn't even that good. Marfa by itself doesn't even get you to Magnifica. You have to have Marfa plus a name. But if you go Marfa plus a name and then you go Marfa into Caspitel to search another name, and then your Caspitel gets hit by a hand trap, then the other name in your hand as an extender also doesn't do much for you. So it's yeah, and if you want to rely on Aratama, then you get into the Flu problem where literally anything negation of the Aratama kind of just ends your turn there too. It's like yeah, I'm not a big fan of Exorcisters, in my opinion. And Heroes, Dark Law, Turbo, yeah, it's so it does. Heroes does like a few things. One of them is Dark Law, which there's another card that Dark Laws, but it's also bigger and it has a removal effect. And then there also has like it has a lot of popping destruction, which popping right now in this format is not the most effective form of removal when you have U-Bells and Fire Kings flying everywhere as well. So yeah, it hasn't been the meta for Heroes in quite a while, in my opinion. But I guess it's better than the other anime deck, the Magia Blue Eyes Turbos decks. And Centurion, the expensive card from the expensive deck from the last month's pack, and I kind of underestimated Centurion a little bit because I thought it was like without Calamity, all this deck puts up is 2 interruptions. Like what's that? But also, the engine doesn't take up that much slot. That many slots. The Centurion engine is quite concise, so you have room to run a lot of other stuff, which is either more hand traps, where if you really want to, you can literally run the most hand traps in the game out of any other deck. So even though you have 2 disruptions, you probably have 2 hand traps in your hand as well. So that's actually a lot harder to play through than you might think, especially because one of the interruptions is literally just a banish on a monster, which is a very strong form of removal that also gives follow-up. And then Blazar is also an annoying Omni Negate, because not only is it an Omni Negate, it flees after it negates something, so your opponent can't get rid of it after it negates something. It just comes back to the end phase and it keeps coming back and just keeps negating your opponent's stuff, and they can't really there's not very many ways to out to keep the Blazer from coming back after it negates something, and you can't like obviously remove it permanently because it's already banished itself. So yeah, I've been like somewhat impressed with Centurion, and it also you could run other engines to increase the ceilings, like you can run Stardust, you can run Resonators, and then you get more interruptions on your end board, and you still have room for hand traps even after including a secondary engine because the Centurion engine doesn't take much space. So yeah, it's a fine deck, honestly. I'm tempted to put it higher than Voiceless Voice because of the non-engine that it runs, and its board is like maybe very slightly weaker than a Voiceless Voice board with just as much follow-up, but it has more ways to tailor itself to beat the format, and also it doesn't have that god awful U-Bell. I mean, it's still U-Bell's not a great matchup, but it's not as bad as like the Voiceless Voice matchup with it, or like the matchup versus Fire King, for example. And here we have a bunch of Cybers decks, and these Cybers decks will probably all be next to each other until the end of time. So like Adignister, Salamangreat, and Mathmech, there's not much to be said about these. These are decks that run a lot of hand traps, although admittedly they run less hand traps than Centurion can potentially, and they end on like a board. Here's seriously, I actually don't know how to order these decks in particular, because Centurion end board is probably the weakest out of all these 5, but it has the most room to tech for the meta, so it might be better. Like, it runs more non-engine than even the Cyber decks themselves, so it's kind of hard to differentiate too much. I will say, I think out of all these Cyber decks, I think Mathmech might be in for the biggest drop-off this format, because if people are playing more Bystials because of U-Bell and like potentially Voiceless Voice, like before the Bystials were like almost extinct from the meta, like nobody was playing Bystials when the Fire decks were the best, and then Mathmech didn't have to worry about that, and Bystials are like the one hand trap that Mathmech actually cares about, where it doesn't really care about other hand traps if it opens circular. But if Bystials are going to be part of the format, then that's one thing that's going to hurt Mathmech a lot more than the other Cybers decks, for example. But also, I underrated how weak a typical Mathmech board is to Typhon, for example, since like your main interruption is super factorial, but if you super factorial and they're able to get another monster on board, then your board is broken, because they just like summon like a hand trap and then put a Typhon over it. Now your Terahertz can't do anything, it can't activate, it has way too much attack, and it obviously it can't send the Aggregator to negate the Typhon, and then the Typhon enters battle phase, attacks over the what's it called, the Laplacian, and then that gets rid of that negate, and then main phase 2 it bounces Terahertz back to your extra deck, and then bam, your board's broken, and now you're down to the Typhon on board. And Typhon being on board is also annoying for Mathmech to deal with, because the main ways it kills you are Terahertz and Access Code, and both those have way too high attack to be able to use their effects when Typhon is on board. So they actually have to do awkward lines to try and kill you as well. It's yeah, I don't like a lot of these decks. Mathmech is like one of the decks in here that gets hurt the most by the Typhon that I didn't realize last format. So that's why I'm putting it as the weakest of the Cybers decks, even though it's, again, all these are just decks that run tons of hand traps and put up a pretty decent board that's good enough to win when backed up with other hand traps. Tri-Brigade. Okay, so I don't know what's up with this deck. People keep topping random shit with Tri-Brigade. There's always like at least that one dude that tops every Duelist Cup with Tri-Brigade Sprite, and now someone topped the first season of Ranked Duels, top 10. First season of Rated Duels, top 10 with a fucking Tri-Brigade Sprite. I don't know how the hell people keep doing it. I don't understand how you make this deck work. It runs so many bricks and engine cards. It doesn't even run. It's not even the Sprite version that runs Shifter, but they make it work. So like, who am I to say that this deck is bad, right? No, clearly there's something with this deck, and I'm just not good enough as a player to see it. But yeah, it's obviously better than what I initially thought it was, so it deserves its spot, I guess. And Labyrinth. So Labyrinth. It's, man, how the mighty have fallen, huh? You look here. Basically, just look at the top decks. Okay, anytime you could, if you have like Fire King, Snake Eyes, and Yubel, you can argue as the two best decks of the format. It's really tough to play Labyrinth. Labyrinth is those are like your two worst matchups in the game, and they're like the two most commonly played decks in the game. It's like no matter what you do tech against them, it's at the end of the day, your engine is useless against these decks. So yeah, it's a bit unfortunate there that like this deck just the two, or fortunate depending on how you feel about Labyrinth. I know that there's a lot of Labyrinth haters watching my videos, but these metas have not been kind to this deck, which I guess, you know, it's since these decks has been, you know, top tier for a long time. I guess it's due for like a metas where it's not really the, you know, tier 1 or tier 2 or whatever. But yeah, basically it has terrible matchups against the actual best decks of the format right now, and Runic. So this is just all of the fucking Runic variants, like Bestial, Naturia, Generator. I guess you now Goatee Runic is part of it. It has all of these of them share the similar problem of the Runic engine is hit the shit in Master Duel, and Fountain is at 1, and SP Little Knight is in the game. So, you know, your Fountain's never safe, and your Fountain is like, once it's gone, and also there's consistency problems because you're drawing a lot more golden droplets and smiting storms than you are tips and like freezing curses and destructions, you know, the actual good Runic spell traps. And then also lack of room for non-engine when if you let your opponent set up an entire Yubel end board, it's really hard to actually play through that. Yeah, just a bunch of things. You know all the all the problems of Runics probably by now in Master Duel. Supreme King. This is the one pendulum representation. I kept this in because I think Supreme King is probably the best pendulum deck in Master Duel, simply because it's the one that has the room for the most non-engine. Like, this actually has room for maybe 13 hand traps in a pendulum deck, which other pendulum decks wish they could, but they could never. So yeah, that's the advantage. It's still kind of weird, kind of struggles playing going second into boards being the pendulum deck, but at least it has the option to run non-engine to help it, so that you're not fully trying to play into a full board every time. You know, you can play into half boards, and you're more likely to be successful that way than like letting your opponent cook with the normal, like, usual pendulum decks with like barely any non-engine and then having to fight through that. That's rough. And like honestly, the end board is like good enough, like 3 to 4 plus points of interaction through a hand trap. Often this deck is like, it's the least pendulum deck created, but yeah, that's probably why it's the best pendulum deck. Stun. Yeah, stuns. Floodgates are still legal, even if all the good ones are hit. You know, they're. Anyone notice you've been running into a shit ton of stun in this format? Like, people just hate playing this format right now. Yeah, and then so Infernoble and Rika and Mikanko. I'll explain why Mikanko, but I group Mikanko with these, but Infernoble and Rika, these are basically go first pseudo FDK decks. Yeah, you go first, and you put up an unbreakable board. Going second may not win all those games going second. You might have like a 40% win rate going second. Doesn't matter if you win 80 to 90% of your games going first. So yeah, that is basically these decks in the gist of it. Go over the top, wombo combo, try to win the game. Go every game you go first. And Mikanko. Okay, so Mikanko. Why am I acting like I'm grouping Mikanko in with a fucking Infernoble and Rika? Because there's two ways to play Mikanko. One of them is the blind second way that everyone knows about. You know, board breakers, lava golems, double-edged sword technique, attack, OTK, that stuff. That's not the best version to play Mikanko. Blind second Mikanko is the worst way to play Mikanko. The best way to play Mikanko is the fucking 60 card warrior pile. that basically tries to do the same combos as Infernoble, except goes even more ham, ends on even more interruptions. And why? Because Hare, the fire Mikanko, is a warrior, so there's synergy there. Isolde sends the Mikanko, Mayawashi, or whatever the hell that equip spell is, and that equip spell lets you summon Mikankos from the grave. Even if your soul gets negated, you can summon more bodies out, and it's like the end board it does is like similar to like the Inferno. You're just doing Inferno plays with a Mikanko engine, and you're running 60 cards. So like if you get stopped, you still end on the untargetable. You can still end on the untargetable Huli with like a Spirit Walk suck and all that stuff, and you can still do something even if your plan A gets stopped. Now I don't think it's better than normal Infernoble because I personally think that being able to run 40 cards and being able to see and having actual room for non-engine and being able to see out the max C is more important than being able to combo through every single, like being able to combo through like 2 cantraps, but also like having very little room for non-engine, and then also not seeing your outs to max C, which you will have to pass to if they do max you. So yeah, but yeah, Mikanko, noted Isolde combo deck. Okay, not the blind second Mikanko. It's a combo deck. If we want the blind second decks, okay, these are the blind second decks. Okay, yeah, I don't. This is how I feel about blind second decks. Yeah, this is tempted to put them here honestly because they're slightly more viable against decks against Yubel, surprisingly, because Yubel is weaker to board breakers, but you don't want to blind second against fucking Snake Eye Fire King. You don't want to blind second against decks that are pseudo FDKing you, like the warrior piles that I just mentioned, like over here. And yeah, destruction based effects are often your strongest board breakers, but they're also like not particularly strong to some of the best decks in the meta. Also, board breaking against Raid Raptor, the new deck as previously mentioned, not gonna go as well because of the towers, and then like you go second against Ice Spirit, it's still annoying us. Imagine playing a board breaker deck going second against Ice Spirit, and then they use the Floodgate monster that stops you from using spells. Well, good luck Sky Striker. Yeah, I just don't think you want to be blind seconding right now. This format is still too high of a power level to where blind seconding is like an actual advantage. And Horus decks. Okay, so Horus decks will put in. I don't know what this is, because none of the best decks, none of these top decks really use the Horus engine. You only really see the Horus engine when you start getting down to like the mid tier 3, and then or lower, and then you see Horus. But then again, probably the most successful build of Horus is the fucking 60 card War Crime Snake Eyes Tearlaments, quote unquote Tearlaments. In reality, you're just milling as much as you can, just trying to get multiple snows engraved. It's like that's like the best use of the Horus engine. That or Stun, but as Horus Stun has thankfully fallen off because a lot of its good floodgates got hit. So yeah, and Tearlaments. So Tearlaments is I don't know where to put Tearlaments. You could put Tearlaments as the best tier 3 deck. You put it as like a mid tier 3 deck. You wouldn't be wrong either way. As of now, tier, like I'm not a tier believer personally. I feel like the deck is very vulnerable to a lot of hand traps, and especially if you are playing more Bichios now, that's another thing that's like it has to that's like hampers it, because if people are playing Bichios because of Voiceless Voice and Yubel and more decks that are weak to Bichios, then tier suffers from that. But also it also got top 10 in the rated duels last season, so, and it was a pure tier deck without any horror stuff. It was just pure tier. So who am I to say tier is a bad deck either? Apparently I just don't know jack jack shit apparently. So yeah, I don't. It's not as good as these decks, obviously. So I'm still putting it a tier below. But yeah, Dynamorphia. Yeah, I underestimated how terrible the U-Bell matchup was. Yeah, you have a 0% win rate versus U-Bell going second, and you have like a, and you don't even auto win against U-Bell going first because you gotta run. Your Rex term doesn't do shit against U-Bell if all they're gonna do is just attack into you with Nightmare Pain. So that's kind of annoying as shit. Yeah, the random deck that just gets blasted by U-Bell's battle damage mechanic. Yeah, you gotta open 3 counter traps to go to win versus U-Bell with Dynamorphia. So, and U-Bell is like probably the most played deck, if not the second most played deck in Master Duel right now. So yeah, even if this deck isn't auto winning going first against its most common matchup, then it's probably not. It's probably rogue level at best. Speaking of rogue level at best, Paleo. If you're not Joshua Schmidt, it's probably. We'll put the 2 Josh pet decks together. You guys can fight over which one is better, Paleo or Runic variants. Monodium. It's nothing has really changed on Monodium. It's probably like, I think it's might be a better combo deck than Super Heavy Samurai just because it's some more consistent and can run more else to max seed. That's pretty much it. Doesn't have the most room for non-engine, but that's okay. Auto wins going first if it doesn't get max seed, but if it gets max seed, fucking, you probably lose that game. So yeah, not much to say about Monodium. Nothing has really changed that much about it in months. So it's probably like stuck. We'll put it in like these with these other ones. Monodium is actually probably better going second than Infernoble and Rika. So I guess we'll put it here. We'll give it that. Unchained. Unchained is like it's like pure Snake Eyes. It's a deck that nobody is playing, and nobody is probably gonna play ever again in Master Duel. This deck has underperformed at every format in Master Duel since it's released, and now that U-Bell is out, and people are only playing Unchained cards and U-Bell now. I haven't played a pure Unchained deck in like basically since U-Bell came out, and I feel like it's gonna remain that way. This deck's not even bad. Like its destruction, its engine isn't the worst against even the top decks. Like because its resilience to destruction, it's actually probably a better matchup than something like Labyrinth is versus top decks, for example. So that's why it's not in Rogue, because its engine is actually pretty decent. I just don't see many people just playing Unchained, pure Unchained, when since the release of U-Bell. So yeah, maybe just for lack of data points. Valmonica. Speaking of decks I haven't seen in a while, yeah, I haven't played against the Valmonica since the ban list that banned Kaiser Coliseum and like hits summon limit, and that's basically since the World Championship qualifier. I have not played against a single Valmonica. Don't know what the hell happened to this deck. Did it fall off that hard? Maybe. I don't know, but Guska seems okay, but I guess if your entire game plan is to make Guska sometimes through one hand trap, maybe. Yeah, it's Dragon Link. So Dragon Link is still, it has the Typhon problem. As I mentioned before, the end board for Dragon Link can be very vulnerable to Typhon. The only saving grace is that potentially Bystials are going to be better, and if Bystials are better, then Dragon Link gets better, because Dragon Link obviously is the deck that plays the most Bystials. So, if you do play against a lot of U-Bell and Voiceless Voice and Tyr and Branded, these decks where Bystials are good against, then yeah, Dragon Link looks good. But if you play against Snake Eyes Fire Kings with dragons, it's still you're not probably winning that matchups. We'll say that. If My Girl and Moe, yeah, there's nothing really changed about Sword Soul in months. So everyone knows what Sword Soul does. Then we have Sword Soul 2.0 now with Voiceless Voice, which is it's just Ritual Sword Soul. So about 20 times more expensive though. So there's that. And Memento. It's another deck that I just have not played against. I don't know what happened to Memento. I feel like Memento is good, but like Well, I think it's Memento is better than Chimera, for example, and like better than all these rogue decks. But again, like, I have not played against the Memento in like 2 to 3 months. Same with Almantica. Same with like uh what else did I mention? Same with like Unchained. I don't know what like all of these decks just disappear on the face of the map. So I don't think they're that bad to where they're unplayable, but clearly the community thinks differently. So, and if you think differently about any of these other choices, please let me know and let me roast me for them, please. I need that engagement. Actually, now that I'm seeing it on my OBS, there's so many decks that I put on this tier list that it's actually cutting off like one of the tiers just because there's so many decks. So, in the future, I'll probably not include this many decks. This is honestly, near the end there were a lot of decks that I didn't even play against at all in like multiple formats in a row. So yeah, this again, I still definitely am missing decks that people do care about. So if you're one of those people whose favorite deck is missing from this tier list, please shoot me a comment as well, and let me know why I'm wrong about a deck that I missed on this tier list, because I probably am, and I just didn't think of it. So yeah.